Hi, I'm Alan.
Hi, this is Dionysus.
Hi, I'm Kyle.
And hi, this is Breaker, and you're listening to Magic Hour, a podcast about all things Treasure DAO. Guys, we have a special Magic Hour exclusive with you tonight. This is End and Peita here to talk to you about Bridgeworld 2.0. We're really excited to have you guys here. Welcome.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks for
It's
having
great
us.
to be here. Yeah, I'm just excited to talk about the launch and brief you guys a little bit about how Bridgeworld works and Questing 2.0 works.
Awesome. And it's also good to have you back here for a second time as well.
Yes, sir.
All right, so before we get into the new Bridgeworld 2.0 details, I wanted to ask you guys kind of to recap Bridgeworld 1.0, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, and how you approached those challenges in this latest update.
Yeah, so I can probably take it here. So Bridgeworld 1 was kind of like it's an innocent period where people can just farm and basically accumulate. But the problem with that was also that if you didn't give them places to spend and use those items, it tends to be dumped. So we had the roadmap to basically progressively launch all these features and one by one bring the sinks up and running. But as you know, like product takes time to build, and really, it's only just starting to come online with Questing 2.0. So a lot of the first edition issues with Bridgeworld were to do with inflation, mainly to do with just the rate in which people could amass treasures. There wasn't a rate at which we could limit people from getting their drop rates. Everyone got a flat 15% drop rate on treasures. And then on top of that, there was like the summoning issues to do with just people mass summoning. Like the rate at which that was inflating was almost as exponential. It was kind of like bacterial. They were just multiplying, right? So like one of the emergency patches that we did, and we were actually going to introduce it later for Bridgeworld, was actually just the summoning patches that we had to push up ahead. So there were the two main issues, I think. There were a few other issues to do with like inaccessibility, and then the utility of certain items in the game weren't quite powerful enough to actually incentivize people to actually go and break and destroy treasures. And just in general, like the whole ecosystem kind of needed a little bit of time to find their balance, like the pricing of what certain items and so forth. We've come a long way since then. I think we understand the issues pretty well now, and so like a lot of the features, starting with Questing 2.0 and a number of releases that would follow that right after, as we get down to building, would one by one tackle some of these issues and then hopefully rein the economy in and make it more circular in a way that makes it more sustainable also. And then you've got the harvesters on the back end of things doing the heavy lifting of incentivizing people to actually make the economy work.
Oh, no, okay. So I think adding on to that, we envision like 1.0 to be the alpha version of Bridgeworld, where a lot of experimentation takes place. So some of the loops were kind of open, and then we're aiming to close that in like Questing 2.0 and then subsequent releases such as the Harvester. And I think to that point, we probably didn't really convey the alpha testing period, probably. But in fact, like 1.0 was just more us trialing different ways, looking at different mechanisms and see how they play out. So with like 2.0, a lot of the open loops will be closed. And hopefully with Questing 2.0, that introduces a different mechanism for like treasure drops in terms of like fragment, which Peter can talk about later, that both reduces like questing time, but also increases, give people like a dopamine boost in a way when item drops.
I strictly play the questing part of Bridgeworld, and I love it. I love that little dopamine hit, whether when I reveal after I send my guys out off to quest whether or not I get a treasure. I get really excited when I get a treasure too. So I love how this game plays, and I'm excited to see the new iteration.
And just another thing, and again, we're gonna, as you said, we're gonna definitely touch upon it more later into the episode. But I guess having fragments, correct me if I'm wrong, is gonna be one of the main concepts is also to solve one of the big problems that were occurring within the just treasures themselves, which are just the inflation of the quantities that were being produced. Am I correct?
Yeah, so like with fragments, it's kind of like it was designed in a way that one, people could get more often, like they could get dopamine hits more often. The other part that's to do with inflation is we actually designed it so that the rough inflation rates of this new system reflect the previous one. So it should be roughly the same to begin with. The thing about it, however, is because you need to collect fragments and they come randomly, that some people might not actually get enough fragments to begin with, or they might not, stay the course and get all of them to be able to actually craft a treasure. And so like because of that, it might be a little bit low, the inflation rate. You just have a lot of like scattered fragments, like dust in addresses. So
I definitely want to learn more about the fragments when we start talking about 2.0, but I kind of just have one more question about 1.0, and it's something N mentioned, which was, can you give me an example of one of those open loops, or maybe you just referenced it in Alam's question, but what was one of those open loops that you identified and needed to close?
So like one of the open loops were really to do with the items that were being produced. So, things like essences shards, prism shards, and so forth. We had a plan for them, but we just didn't have the time to really push out a cohesive plan for it. So, starting with questing 2.0, mini crafts, they'll start to be utilized a little bit more. In general, the loops were really to do with the items and then just the utility underlying, backing these items. If the incentive wasn't strong enough, then people just ignored it. That wasn't really quite there, so we consider that like a bit of a retarded loop. It just didn't work, right? So,
and that makes sense. I just wanted to get some clarity there, because some of the people who listen might not understand the idea of these different types of loops and why they're a problem. So thank you for kind of addressing that a little bit.
And I think like another example is the constellation system, right? So to operate constellation, you would need essence of starlight and prisms, but there wasn't like any immediate utility for them. We definitely have a plan for like the later iteration of Bridgeworld where, you can stake magic on your legion and explore. But we're not there yet. But to increase like utilization for like essences and prisms in questing 2.0, you can actually, constellation would actually play a role when you go on quests.
Okay, cool.
Which you could touch on later.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll learn more about that as we discuss the questing 2.0. So why don't you guys walk us through all the updates, however you feel it makes sense, and tell us how the new game is going to be played.
Yeah, sure. So like basically like the main feature release that we're looking at, first and foremost is questing 2.0. With that one, it ties together constellations, a revamp of how treasures are going to be dropped, so treasure fragments, and on top of that, slight variations to the crafting system. We have a system that's called like mini crafts. Basically, they're small little recipes for forming your fragments together. And the idea is to lower the entry barrier for a lot of the players. So one of the other pain points that we noticed when we first launched Bridgeworld was, amidst all the hype and all the excitement around the treasure ecosystem at the start of the year, all the asset prices basically got a little bit too expensive for normal players to try out. So we tried the recruit system, but that needs a lot of work, because basically anytime we give something for free, like a recruit, any kind of economic value gets farmed into the ground, and hundreds of bots pop out of nowhere. So we wanted to create something where the average crypto user that's just wants to explore, doesn't really want to put more than a couple $100 into something, can get started and basically try out the game at a very low level in a way that's not superficial, like with the recruits. Basically, the loop there is pretty much point and click and do and wait. It's not quite that interesting. With one of the pain points, we first and foremost turn treasures into fragments so that the drop rate could go up without necessarily increasing inflation rates. And also that we could have some flexibility on how we wanted to transition towards a system. I know End had idea of having specific affinities or class-based treasures and so forth. So it was kind of our way to kind of start bridging towards that kind of system. But we'll talk a bit about that later. But yeah, mainly having fragments so that it can drop, and then also drop that alongside full treasures. So you kind of have different levels of dopamine hits for certain different classes of legions. So let's say normal legions, they'll get fragments, but then Genesis legions, they'll get fragments and a small chance of a bigger dopamine hit, maybe a full treasure, stuff like that. Then also splitting up the treasure fragments in such a way that different zones would kind of drop different types of treasures. So you not only have to kind of go down one path and upgrade one type of constellation, but now you have choices, right? You have to explore different elemental parts of constellations, and then adventure in different ways to be able to collect the different types of treasures that you want. So encouraging the use of fragments for more dopamine hits, more frequent dopamine hits, speeding up the gaming loop cycle so that we can shorten it. And then also just encouraging players to collect a diversity of treasures. So at the moment, with the different tiers of treasures, there's no distinction between really why do you need like a dragon tail versus like a penny or something like that, right? They all kind of serve the same purpose. So just giving players more reason and more kind of lore behind each of the items. Like, why do I need that particular item versus that one? Is there a purpose to that? We're starting to inject a little bit more of that into Questing 2.0 with the card game and so forth. You kind of need a diverse portfolio of treasures to do better at that game-wise. So that's kind of the first part to do with like addressing and tackling a number of the accessibility issues that we had with like how treasures were dropped to begin with. I know people, because we had to control inflation, we had to lower it quite a bit, that we noticed a lot of people go on unlucky streaks, right? They would go questing 20, 30 times in a row and get nothing, and then they'd feel like, oh, is this system broken or not? When really like maybe it's just like an unlucky streak, right? So hopefully fragments kind of like reduces some of these issues, makes the game more predictable, and then gets people more engaged and more active in the groups again.
First off, it sounds like now we have different questing paths, and if you're low level, you're going to earn treasure fragments. Can you craft a full treasure with those fragments, or is it kind of like a chance that you might be able to craft a treasure?
So at the moment, they will just succeed. If you have enough fragments, you can craft and it will work. Yeah.
Got it. And is it just a low rarity, or do you have a chance to even get like a T1?
With the questing, they'll drop fragments of different tiers.
Oh, okay, got it. So you have to collect certain... Oh, that's pretty exciting, because then you're going to get fragments, but you're going to get all sorts of different fragments. So it might take you a bit of time. I like that. And then there's different locales that you'll be adventuring to, and they'll have their own treasure pool or fragment pool to pull from that'll be different from the other regions that you go to. And then you're saying that you have to visit all of them to complete constellations. Am I getting all of that?
Yeah, so like with the constellations, like the different ones will give you different advantages in different zones. So it will help you, cool. Yeah, it'll help you collect your fragments and your treasures.
So it's kind of more of like a path building system. That it's kind of like you venture into the own path that you kind of want to indicate yourself going towards based off the treasures that you receive and the fragments and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So building towards that kind of vision, like the first iteration obviously is going to be like linear paths, but maybe later we can experiment and do something more creative there.
Yeah, because eventually we want to incentivize people to have like conscious decision making. So it's not, you go to this path and you get this particular reward, but there's like choices involved in game. So hopefully it's more immersive and dynamic.
It sounds more immersive and dynamic, and I like the idea of choice. It gives you more opportunity to try different methods, so to speak.
And, it's more of the player basis judgment that kind of indicates the result of what ends up recurring at the end, right? Not more so just more of a systematic RNG based model. I mean, obviously that does have indication towards as well, but in terms of decision making, it's more so incentivized on the player decides to get to do what they want to do within the game, which is, I really like that, honestly. It adds more of a creativity aspect, and at the same time, this gives more, again, as End was saying, incentivization on the player base themselves on deciding on what they want to do within the game.
Oh yeah, so like the first part of the issues that we were tackling with Bridgeworld 1 were to do with how treasures were dropped. The second part is how they're forged, and what we wanted to address was actually some of the issues we had with crafting. So when we first launched crafting, we had a break system, and it was kind of a little bit scary for people to, gamble some of their treasures that, could have been worth a couple $100 or in some cases like up to $1,000 to put that on the line and then, have like a crack at producing some of the crafting items. What we noticed was, people were extremely risk averse, and more so. More so because of the fact that harvesters weren't out yet, so they weren't really sure what the benefit was. So there's a lot of speculation there. So we needed a way for people to basically have a low-cost access to crafting. So treasure fragments is kind of like our solution to both like some of the issues with questing and also like providing lower entry kind of recipes for new players to try crafting at. So that's the other part of that.
So you can now craft with like lower value items and not be as worried if they break. If you craft with the regular treasure, will it break into fragments?
Not at the moment, but it's actually a really good idea that you just brought up, and we can consider that. Yeah, but yeah, basically, like the idea with mini crafts is it has to be like the economic consequences have to be very low to get people like started
Right.
into crafting. So with treasure fragments, they don't break; they just give you the reward. The other part is it requires like prism shards. So in a way that these things are they're pretty much like they're guaranteed every time you go on the quest. So they're basically low cost items that you can put into recipe, try out crafting, and so forth.
Right.
So there's no consequences there.
So it's now more of a sink for prism shards.
Yeah, it's also that as well. Yeah, and you can get a little bit of XP and stuff like that. So it just gives players who aren't necessarily in the 10k, 20k range with like a legion, and they can have 10 or 20 treasures and afford to break one or two of them. It just gives that lower class of people dabbling with the game and trying it out like more accessibility there.
With earning the experience, are you guys increasing the level cap for the different legions?
Not at the moment, but it's something that we have in mind.
Okay, no, that's fine. I guess follow up to that is if you do eventually increase the level cap, does that require you creating a new contract and migrating the NFTs, so to speak?
Not necessarily. As far as I know, the contracts are all upgradable. So it'll be like pretty easy to do anyways.
No, that's fine. I'm just curious about those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think the main thing that we would probably think about when it comes to increasing level caps is every time you do that, you kind of the onboarding experience gets longer, and so like people looking let's say like 6 months or 12 months later down the track, someone looking to get into the game will look at the progressions and think, oh, is that worthwhile my time? Is that worth my time to get to that level? I recall like a lot of the issues that a lot of the early MMORPGs had was really just like that level grind, and so at some point, I think we might want to slightly or start to like move away from having too many level kind of like requirements that require a lot of time investment and so forth. I think over time, the time component starts to drive a lot of people away. If they need to do like 90 days worth of something before they can get somewhere, then that might be like a huge deterrent, and it might actually help. It might actually slow down adoption. So that's that's the other kind of way we think about it.
Well, I kind of like the idea of like, with Seed of Life, you can stake your treasures if you choose to kind of, boost or give yourself a better chance of earning skills or something like that, or a better class is what it was.
It was stake treasures to have a chance of getting more chance of getting 3 skill reset potion.
Yeah, that's what it was. I think that's kind of a great alternative to a leveling system, only in what you were describing, Peita, because then you can either quest for those treasures or you can buy them on the secondary marketplace to kind of get yourself there. You can't buy levels, can't buy the experience.
Yeah.
All right, continue, by the way.
Sorry, just a quick question as well. Again, I don't want to go off track here, and obviously this is, again, we're focusing more on the questing 2.0 aspect of things, but is there any correlation in terms of summoning, and specifically speaking, Genesis Legions, in terms of the questing aspect of things? Are we going to see any terms of, I guess they say, connection with is any type of Starlight Essence or anything that has to go into that as well?
In this iteration of questing, there isn't any changes to summoning, although that is part of the roadmap. Yeah. So as we focus on each path and iteratively release new features from, we'll get around to that as well.
Yeah, because I think one of the issue we ran into early on, especially in 1.0, is that we released too many things at once, especially, with Bridgeworld trying to release questing, crafting, summoning all at the same time. Like in hindsight, it would be better to like progressively slow roll them out. So that gives us more time to keep the community engaged, but also more time to like keep testing and checking for like any potential issues. So with that said, I think moving forward, we want to like start slowly rolling things out. So with like Bridgeworld 2.0, right, it'll be questing 2.0 first, and then like minicraft, etc., and then leading up to like the harvester. So in that sense, we get to keep the community engaged over like a longer period of time, but also give us more time to like testing probably to ensure that everything is as effective and efficient as safe as possible.
Mm-hmm. No, that definitely makes sense, and I feel like that's going to be an amazing approach.
All right, so I guess we covered most of the questing stuff, but I understand there's probably some like cooldowns, right? And I know you guys, or I heard you guys are taking an approach to that. Is that correct?
Questing is being reduced back down to 7.5 hours. So hearing one of the community concerns was that, the increasing questing time was too long. And it doesn't incentivize that dopamine hit that, everyone liked and loved upon the first release of questing. So yeah, like moving into the version 2.0, all of the questing time will be reduced down to 7.5 hours. And then we're introducing a leg or like a stage system. So like in the first stage, it takes 7.5 hours and it'll be the same across the 3 stages. I guess the only exception, and Peter probably can talk more onto this, is the idea of stasis. I think I pronounced that right. Is that when you go on a quest, there's a small chance of getting stasis or, your legion get stuck in a quest. It's not like burn or anything, it's just stuck there. But here we also introduce like a kind of a good buff for Genesis Legion in that they're immune to like the stasis effect. So in effect, when Genesis Legion are questing, they won't ever be stuck. Yeah. And that's influenced by constellation as well.
So you're saying like a Genesis Legion can still summon while they're questing?
No, they just don't get. Oh no, when I was stuck, it's mean like, say, Peter, you want to explain this? I don't know how to like explain the stasis thing very well.
Yeah, I can give an overview of like the game loop. So basically, with like the questing V2, like constellations, and the constellations kind of it's a system that protects you as you go further and further into the journey. So with questing V2, you can embark on a journey and you can decide how far into the journey you want to go on 3 different sections. And every section takes a period of time. And anytime you want to progress to the next section, there's a risk of stasis where, Legion gets trapped, falls into a ditch or something like that, something bad happens. And they have a cooldown. They have an extra period in which they're trapped for, say, 4 hours or something like that. And every section that anytime you want to progress to the next section, there's a risk of that. And Constellations protects you from that. And by progressing to the next section, you get a chance of greater rewards. So it's kind of like anytime, let's say you're in section 2, you can either decide, okay, let's I'm good here. I've got my treasures here, my drops, or I can take a bit more of a gamble and try to proceed on to the next section for potentially even better rewards, or I can just tap out. And taking the risk to try and go to a further section, there's a chance of stasis, and we're introducing more of a risk reward trade off and letting people decide how far into a journey they want to go.
Gotcha. So the risk is that you might freeze your legion for a period of time if you proceed to that next land. If you don't, and you can use constellations to protect yourself from that.
Yeah, that's correct. So over a number of loops, basically, the constellations will basically add to your APY. If you're not seeing as many cooldowns over time in average, then that helps with the APY. But it's kind of like let's say you're going out like in real life, if you're going out to look for you're scavenging for fruit or something like that, it's the same process. You go out in the farm field and you look for fruit, and if there's nothing good there in the first 10 meters or so, you just keep going in and seeing if there's better stuff. And that's kind of like what we're mimicking here. You can decide how far you want to go. And maybe if you venture out further enough where no one's going, then the treasures are better, the fruit's better, the drops are better, right?
Yeah, because I love doing this. It's like another anime reference. Is if you watch Sword Art Online, there's a tower with different levels, right? So the further up the tower you go, the stronger the boss, but also the more likelihood of dying. In the case of Bridgeworld, you won't actually die, but stasis basically just locks your legion into this idle state, and then you have to wait that out until you can keep moving further onto the different sections.
Got it. So it's almost like you'll complete the path every time, right? Even if you go through stasis, you'll still continue going through the path, or once you go into stasis, you have to start from the beginning again.
You'll go through the path, so it's just an intermediate waiting.
Yeah, so it's kind of slowing down the process as you're continuously going. So adding, again, those challenges that want to be, just increasing the longevity of the project. Yeah.
Cool. I'm excited. I'm gonna be honest though. I like the 24-hour questing time because I can kind of like do it every morning and then I don't have to think about it again. Every 8 hours is like, oh man, more work that I have to do.
It is more work, but at the same time, more work, more reward, right? So comes.
You make a good point.
It's actually an issue that I'm kind of thinking of as well. Like, how do we revamp questing in a way that it doesn't have set time periods, but rather maybe it might run on epochs. So maybe within a 24-hour period, you have every legion can do X amount of questing, and then the questing cycle is actually a lot shorter. Let's say it's like 20 minutes per section or something like that, or even shorter. But then like it's just something that we're teasing out because I've had some advice from one of the guys that worked at EA designing games. He mentioned like a lot of the mobile games they designed, like people don't like having these long ass sessions, these absolute sessions where they have to wait and time it. Rather compress it down and then just most gamers only want to play like a couple hours, or like not even that, maybe an hour or two a day, and get it all out of the way.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I mean, I love mobile game. I love one mobile game. It's called Hearthstone. You might have played it, but I like it because it's digestible in like 15 to 30-minute chunks, and that's it. And then I'm done with it if I need to be or whatever. But you look at something like League of Legends, and I bring this up because me and Alan were talking about this before, but League of Legends requires an hour-long commitment, hour and a half, maybe sometimes if it's like a really good game. I can't do that ever. I might have to step away for something. But so I like that approach, Peter, is what I'm saying, and I think that's a smart move, for this type of thing.
We haven't really seen this come in this type of cooldown type of period, I guess you can say, or just kind of changing when it comes to time frames and pauses that need to be kept within gameplay. Again, we haven't, as far as it comes to my knowledge, I haven't really seen a lot of games kind of take this approach, and it's kind of, I really, really do like the aspect of how you guys are kind of deriving it from over the games that are using this, and at the same time, they're being used within mobile games and stuff like that. It's kind of bridging that type of aspect and the cooldown period in terms of gameplay into this as well. And I personally really think that's cool. It's gonna be really nice to see.
Yeah, so we got like a new marketing person on, and to help out with some of these bigger launches. So the reasoning for that is to hopefully get momentum back and also incentivize a more like immersive experience that actually involve the community. So instead of posting a teaser on like Twitter or like Discord, we want to have people actually decide what they want to be teased. So like with the like community event, right? People were allowed to pick what legions they want to take on a quest, and then what zone they want to take that legion onto. And then the lore writers, Jay as well as Namsing, writes the actual story about that. And then in that sense, the teaser, like either UI or art, is accompanied by lore, which creates like this narrative, and that's fun to follow, and then like allow people to like immerse themselves in like the story of Bridgeworld, basically. So we thought it would be like a nicer way than just teasing just pictures.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the whole idea of telling a story. I think that's what will get people engaged for sure. I think in this particular Discord, I should probably start linking certain channels in the Treasure Discord so that they just populate in here.
Definitely, and at the same time, it's always I personally feel like it's always a puzzle that a lot of again, as you were saying, it brings a community together and gives it more of an immersive experience as well. And it's just, I've always loved the puzzle building and everything that comes within, finding whatever clues are given within the lore, or if there's anything that I could use to benefit within, just strategy building for Bridgeworld itself. And I've seen it in Discords all the time, and I feel like it's an amazing thing to just see being done within gameplay itself and being attached to it.
Yeah, I think I might just go through the some of the dev diary stuff. There's a little bit of an outline of like where we plan to take things after questing 2.0, and most of them are basically they're derived from like us directly addressing some of the economic issues with Bridgeworld. So okay, so we have in Q2 2022 with the dev diary, we have like quests, constellation journeys, we have mini crafts and treasure fragments. So that's like the next release that we're doing. After that, we have a concept called like corruption, and it's kind of like this global deflationary mechanism that people have to coordinate and kind of like drive back and work towards to kind of unroll corruption.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It kind of like what it does. Yeah, what it kind of does is it forces people to kind of like put their items to work, and in order to kind of like it's kind of like a winter that like descends upon Bridgeworld, and people have to work bit by bit. It seeps into the buildings, it seeps into the harvests and so forth, and it slows it down. And it's up to the legions to kind of like roll that back and coordinate against that. So in a way, what we're introducing is So we're kind of still working through the recipes and so forth like that. Like it's going to be fairly low cost and low risk for people to participate. But what it does is it kind of also gives us this inflationary and deflationary lever to kind of like lower and push and heat up the economy when it's appropriate to do so. And then if there's too much inflation, people get too excited and so forth to kind of like increase it and rein back the economy. So it's almost like an interest rate. It's a decay rate that's like global to whole of the Bridgeworld. In a way, it's also analogous to seasons. So basically, we're kind of drawing the parallel between inflation, cycles of inflation and deflation, or to basically actual weather within the world. So that might lead to like the aesthetics of the game changing from time to time based on whether they're in like a expansion phase or contraction phase. So giving color towards the economic cycles that underpin Bridgeworld. That's kind of like some of the overarching goals that we have, corruption. And then the other aspect of that is it will kind of bridge into later sections of the game in which like we start introducing more light PvP mechanisms between different guilds and so forth. So on top of the harvesters, we kind of have different ways in which we think about PvP. So at the very basic level, you have like the game where you're in the same pool and you're trying to dilute each other and try not get diluted. That's a very light form of PvP, and it's kind of like sushi pools and so forth. But then later we might introduce incrementally more PvP-esque kind of mechanisms, just because we know that having it too competitive is pretty brutal. Like, let's say with the harvesters and guilds are fighting each other. Most players don't want to get involved with that because like the consequences are too high. So we're going to introduce PvP at a very light level and then like a more heavier kind of like guild level. And it's part of and they're also targeting having game mechanisms for people at the user level, the guild level, and also at a global level of how the game is shaped out. So that's some of the stuff that's on the horizon. But that's that's going to be after harvesters most likely, and so there's still a bit of a like period in which we'll build that out and hopefully ship it sometime in the next quarter.
A kind of time frame you guys can provide. I know I don't want to ask you guys for a hard date because I know you can't give us that, but is there some sort of time frame you can provide for when we can see harvesters enter the ecosystem?
Yeah, I can probably provide like status updates, but not so much like time, just because like as you know with Solidity engineering, like uncertain things, like random things can pop up that take more time than you imagine. So at the moment, it's like deep in development. Like a lot of the code base and architecture is done. So at this point, a lot of it is to do with us reviewing the architecture and then making sure it makes sense for our purposes going forth. Sometimes we come across like decisions in the architecture level that didn't make sense or like might hamper us later. Let's say when we want to introduce other collections to be able to fight over the harvesters and stake in them. So from time to time, we might find things that actually, oh crap, we actually need to rewrite this part in a way that's more generalized. So making the code generalized is the kind of the uncertainty aspect of it, because we realize things later that we have to do. So I think a lot of that is done, and it's like the code base itself is I'd say it's nearing completion. What remains is a lot of testing. So like writing a lot of robust tests and then getting the orders engaged and then organizing a lot of like just that third party kind of review, because unlike a lot of the other Bridgeworld contracts, harvesters deal directly with money and not just not just simple staking, but rather a very complex kind of splitting of how the emissions are emitted towards each of the harvesters dynamically based on how their people are playing the game, right? And also like utilization and stuff like that. Like, you know, the AUMs of the harvesters matter, and they determine like the emissions and so forth. So because there's a lot of kind of like calculations going on behind the scenes, we have to write a lot of tests to make sure there's no weird edge cases or miscalculations. Subtle calculation bugs are a pretty big thing. Like as you might know, if you're in like DeFi, there's a lot of ways in which slippage and all these weird calculation bugs can happen. So we're just trying to be a little bit more careful.
It's kind of like, for me, it's like dealing with time in Excel and time, just it doesn't work the same way regular math does.
Oh, it's terrible. So, time is like, I know what you mean.
But that's great. And, you know, I think a lot of people are looking forward to the harvester portion of the game. I know, speaking for myself and the Magic Hour team, we've spoken with Magic Dragon DAO. We've discussed the Battlefly one, and you know, I think we can all kind of see some of these projects really wanting to get involved with the harvesters. So I think that I'm excited to see how that all plays out. But you know, I know you guys came here not to talk about the harvesters so much as to talk about Bridgeworld 2.0. So when can we expect the new questing version to launch?
Before the next full moon, which is
before
2 weeks from now, the 15th of May. So before that, for sure.
All right. So sometime before the 15th of May is what you're saying.
Yes.
That's exciting.
I'm really, really excited to see how the Questing 2.0 is going to be involved with the strategy building. That's going to be coming from everyone else now, right? Different game plans, different gameplays, seeing just price action differ as well on the marketplace, and just seeing how all of that unfolds. I think it's going to be really, really cool, and just kind of give a new face to Bridgeworld and see how that continues to fold out. So I'm really excited for that. Honestly, this seems really, really cool.
I want to thank you guys both for coming and telling us about all this stuff. I'm beside myself.
No, I guess it's like a concluding remark. Bridgeworld is still like in its early days, especially like, you know, the alpha testing. So we're doing like a lot of experimentation to see what works for the economy and what is sustainable long term. So with that said, like, we really appreciate it for, you know, both the Magic Hour podcast team as well as like the community for, you know, sticking around and definitely supporting Bridgeworld as well as Greater Treasure. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. So thanks for having us.
You're very welcome, and it's been our pleasure too. We love playing the game, and we appreciate the work you guys are doing on it. And
it's not easy to deliver all of this again at the pace that everything has been going at. And us, of course, you know, there's times where again, every project has problems, and every project has things that definitely need to work on, because again, that's how you improve and just end up getting a more finished and final, you know, just generative whole concept of what people want to create. And again, it's not only your journey, but the community's journey as well. And just, you know, from behalf of Magic Hour and just, I guess you could say, the community that's, you know, still sticking out with everything that's going on. It's, you know, it's definitely a good journey, and it's definitely a journey that I feel like everyone's going to enjoy being on as well.
Yeah. Well, guys, if you don't have anything else you want to share, you're certainly free to jump off. We appreciate you joining us tonight. And I mean, I guess for you it's early morning or maybe late morning. I don't know. Have you had your coffee yet?
I'm about to. I'm jumping all over it. But yeah, no, thanks for having us. It's it's always good to kind of like talk some of these things out and kind of like get the messaging out a little bit better.
And that concludes another episode of Magic Hour, friends. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you can listen to your podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter at Magic Hour Pod. All the links are found on our link tree, which is in the show notes. From all of us, we appreciate your support for Bridgeworld.